Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Driftwood Ranch. I am the literate Texan, Randy L. Ray, and I hit a milestone of 100 subscribers last month. And I wasn't sure, I know that a lot of BookTube participants celebrate milestones with question and answer videos, but I thought with 100 subscribers, maybe I wouldn't get enough questions to create such a video. So I emailed Steve Donahue, who seems eager to answer questions, and he said, well, maybe you should just put out a call for questions to see what happens. It depends a lot on the engagement that you have with the people who are watching your channel. And I was pleasantly surprised and delighted by how much interest there was. I have a list here of 22 questions to answer. I don't know if I'll be able to answer all these in a single video, but you know what? Thank you so much to everyone who wrote in with questions. These are just delightful questions, and I have answers to almost all of them. So I went in reverse order in these. I put them all in a document rather than try to read them in the comments of the other video. I read them before transferring them to the document. So the most recent question in that video is the first question all the way to the last, which was the first question is the last question, and the last question is the first question, if that makes any sense. And it probably doesn't even matter anyway. Let me get on with the questions and answers before I, the whole mad cow thing because of all the meds. Sorry about that. Question number 1. What is the most rewarding hard book you've ever read? I'd love to be able to say Remembrance of Things Past or Ulysses, but I haven't read either of those. At least I hadn't finished them. But I've read most of Shakespeare. So I would say, the complete works of Shakespeare, if I had to pick one particular play, I'd probably pick Hamlet or maybe King Lear, although I have a soft spot for the sonnets. And I think most people these days would agree that those are hard books because, of course, the language is 500 years old. So, Shakespeare is speaking to me from 5 centuries ago, and he's doing the best he can. My ear is pretty well tuned to it. I'll have more to say about Shakespeare and how to get into Shakespeare in a future video. I'm still putting my thoughts together about that. But anyway, great question. Question number 2, what is your favorite place in the United States? Well, I'm a degenerate. So Las Vegas is my favorite place in the United States. I love to play poker, and I prefer to play casino games in the downtown area and see some of the old Vegas, what little of it is left. The big plastic, everything's the same casinos on the Strip are less interesting to me. I spend a lot of time at the poker tables when I'm in Las Vegas. I'm a poker player. I just enjoy swapping stories with other old guys who like to play cards. What is the number place I would like to visit in the world? Paris, France. I would like to visit Paris, France. Question number 3, have you written any books? No, I am a professional writer. Mostly I write online content for blogs. I have written a number of short stories, and I am hard at work at a novel right now. And I wrote 1,300 words towards that, and it's going to be a shorter novel, probably around 50,000 words. I should probably finish sometime around June 7th at the rate I'm going. If yes, tell us about the novel, and if not, what would you like to write about if you could? I'm writing a Sword and Planet novel right now. If you're not familiar with the very tiny genre, it's the same genre that Edgar Rice Burroughs was writing in when he wrote the John Carter books. But there are several other examples. Michael Moorcock wrote books that were also in this genre, the Cain of Mars trilogy. And there's a real famous, long-running series of novels called the Gore series. And the first few novels in that were actually excellent. The later novels started to push the author's ideas about sex and relationships a little bit hard, and they went downhill after that. Let's just say that. Number 4, what is the best legal/courtroom novel you've ever read? I mentioned in one of my earlier videos that that's one of my favorite genres. You know, it's old and it probably doesn't hold many surprises for today's readers, but at the time that I read it, when it came out, it was just absolutely outstanding. I think the author, Scott Turow, is probably the most literary of writers working in that particular genre. And I don't know that much has been written since then that could top Presumed Innocent, which was also a great movie starring Harrison Ford. Who's your favorite author from the big three of weird tales? H.P. Lovecraft, Clark Ashton Smith, or Robert E. Howard? Robert E. Howard is my favorite weird tales author. I'm a big fan of the Conan the Barbarian stories. I love the Solomon Kane stories. And his horror fiction is relatively energetic compared to that of Clark Ashton Smith, who's more of a fantasist than anything really, and H.P. Lovecraft. I do have a soft spot in my heart for H.P. Lovecraft. I've been playing role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons for years, and Call of Cthulhu is my favorite fantasy role-playing game. So, excuse me, I have to take a sip of water. The meds that I'm on sometimes make my mouth a little dry. And this next question, question number 6, is what are your 5 favorite horror novels? So I'm going to give you a list of my favorite 5 horror novels not written by Stephen King. The first one is called The House Next Door by Anne River Siddons. If you haven't read it, you should. It is a very effective horror novel. It's the only horror novel that Anne River Siddons ever wrote. But the premise is, what if you wrote a traditional haunted house novel, but you wrote it from the perspective of the people who were the next door neighbors of the haunted house rather than people who live there? Second one on my list is Lullaby by Chuck Palahniuk. I know some people love Chuck Palahniuk. I know other people can't stand him, but Lullaby was my introduction to him. Most people think of Fight Club when they think of him, but Lullaby was my introduction, and it's about a man who learns a magical spell called a culling song. And basically, it was used by previous generations to instantly and mercifully kill someone who was weak and was going to be a burden on the family or the tribe. And what happens when he gains that power of instant death? World War Z is on my list. It's not particularly scary, but as post-apocalyptic fiction goes, it was excellent. I don't normally recommend audiobook productions, but this one was also excellent. If you've read World War Z, you know that each chapter is told from the perspective of someone who survived the event. In that respect, it's similar to Studs Terkel work, except it's fictional. But the audiobook uses different actors for each chapter because each chapter is told from a different perspective. And there are some surprisingly big names that read those chapters. Anyway, World War Z is excellent. The next on my list is John Dies at the End. I can't remember the author's name right off the top of my head. I should have written it down, and I apologize for not doing that. But it was a pseudonym anyway. And it's a little bit of a comedy horror novel, but it was also surprisingly effective. It was really easy to read. The guy's a really good, in my opinion, prose stylist. You know, it was like eating a big bowl of vanilla ice cream. It just went down really smooth. But I laughed in the places I was supposed to laugh, and I got creeped out in the places I was supposed to get creeped out. And then finally, Swan Song by Robert McCammon is on my list. Another post-apocalyptic novel. And it's basically his answer, or it's his version of The Stand by Stephen King. But it's a remarkably effective novel. It's really, really good. When I was a younger man, I dated a woman, and I'm talking much younger, like 30 years ago, but I dated a woman who loved the fiction of Robert McCammon, and she would buy his novels at 7-Eleven. And I kind of turned my nose up at Robert McCammon because I thought he was a poor man's version of Stephen King. And I think that's kind of how he was marketed. But once I got over this little bit of snobbery, which is really silly when you think about it, that you're a snob for Stephen King over Robert McCammon. You know, it's Stephen King himself will tell you he's the big back and fries of the literary world. But once I got over that and actually read some of those books, Robert McCammon's an excellent novelist. I thought he was terrific. Question number 7, physical books or ebooks? Probably 80 to 90% of my reading is done with physical books. I have a Kindle. I do read ebooks. I really enjoy the fact that I can increase the font size on my Kindle. That's a really cool thing for me because, getting older, eyes are getting weaker. Question number 8, having never been to Texas, which place would you recommend I visit? This is from Book Time with Elvis's channel. I remember this question. So I would recommend visiting Denton, which is my hometown, of course. It's where I live now. My actual hometown is Bonham, but I don't recommend visiting there for long or visiting there first. I do recommend visiting Bonham. It's a historic place. But the thing about visiting Denton is you're just short drive from Dallas, so you're really visiting Dallas and Denton at the same time. If you're not going to do that, then you should definitely check out Austin. If I come to your town for a visit, how would we spend the day? I feel like I'm on the dating game suddenly. But I do have a plan for that, okay? For one thing, we would start the day by having pancakes at a restaurant called Old West Cafe, which makes the best pancakes in town. And then we would visit Recycled Books and Records, which is a huge bookstore in the old Opera House on the Square. It's a big pink and purple building, and it's on 3 stories. It's been in business since I was in college, which was 30 or 40 years ago. And you could spend all day in there if you wanted to, for sure. But I wouldn't, because I would also want to go to the Alamo Draft House here to catch a matinee. And then I would want to take a quick road trip to Dallas to hang out at my favorite dive bar, the King's X Club on Forest Lane. I don't drink anymore, but there is a drawing of me on the wall there still, along with probably 20 more people. I'm not unique, but it's a wonderful place to play shuffleboard and see what a dive bar in Texas is really like. I want to say the maximum occupancy there is 38 people. And the people who drink there, they're not sipping their drinks. It's a serious watering hole, if you know what I mean. So, and then finally, Denton, Texas is home to what I think is probably one of the best sushi places in the world, definitely in the country. And it's called Kaiichi. It only has 12 seats. So if you're coming to Texas to visit old Randy Ray, let me know in advance so I can make sure that we have reservations there. I do get reservations at Kaiichi on a regular basis too. And that's how I would spend the day with somebody. And even if you hate sushi, they have steaks and terrific Italian food. It is off the chain. It is literally, when people ask me what the best restaurant in Denton, Texas, I don't even mention Kaiichi because no one else is even going to come close. So what would be the title of your autobiography? I've been asked something similar to this before, but I've been tweaking this idea, okay? I think I would name my autobiography Alcoholism, Lust, and Luck, the Randy Ray story. Who's your favorite Texan of all time? My dad is my favorite Texan of all time. We lost him about 3 years ago. He was a wonderful, soft-spoken, true Southern gentleman. He had no problem spending money buying me comic books or books to read. He did not like giving me quarters to play Galaga at the grocery store, but he did not mind buying me comic books. And when I was too young to read them myself, he would read them to me. He was a wonderful man. One of the smartest men I ever knew, and one of the most practical too. Incredibly kind, terrific person. Spent 33 years working at the VA hospital in Bonham, Texas, taking care of veterans. If you had to make YouTube videos about things other than books, what would your channel be about? That one's easy. I would have a channel about classic films. I'm obsessed with movies from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, especially film noir. But if it's a classic Hollywood film, I'm probably interested in it. Excuse me, I have to take another sip of water. If I don't, you won't be able to understand me because I'll start croaking. What book would you recommend to anyone? My favorite, well, you know what? Actually, I'm going to change that. There's a book I would recommend to anyone called Everything Matters by Ron Curry Jr., but I'm not sure that book is terrific for just anyone. It's a little bit of a science fiction book. But I would recommend To Kill a Mockingbird to anybody. That's a terrific book. It's one of those classics that lives up to its name. I would also say The Great Gatsby, but I think The Great Gatsby is a particularly American book, so I don't know how interesting it would be to people in other countries. But I think To Kill a Mockingbird is probably a little more universal. Hard to go wrong with either of those, though. What 3 things do you love most about Texas? That one's pretty easy, too. Texas music is terrific. There is a vibrant Texas music scene going on to this day. You can thank Ann Richards. She was governor here for some of that. But you can also thank Willie Nelson and Jerry Jeff Walker and a whole host of other people who've made a lot of great music in Austin. Denton, Texas is also a vibrant musical community. One of the colleges here, where I went to school, the University of North Texas, was home to one of the finest jazz programs in the country. But there are a lot of musicians here in Denton, Texas. In fact, I've recently started learning how to play the guitar. I say recently, about 10 years ago. Most people learn to play the guitar when they're like 14. I waited until I was 44. So, the music, number one. The women, number two, obviously. Texas women are beautiful. And finally, the food. Every town and every state has its own food scene. But Texas is so big and has such a wide variety of food available. And, it's not just Tex-Mex and chicken fried steak down here. We've got all kinds of game. Barbecue is really good in Texas. It's a good place to eat, man. I don't know if you can tell from the camera and where I'm sitting and stuff, but I'm a pretty big old boy, and there's a reason for that. So, share something about you that may seem surprising. Okay, this is really personal. I weigh over 600 pounds. And I put the camera close to my face so you can't see the full figured me. But I lost 150 pounds about 3 years ago. I was heavily involved in a physique transformation project. And so I'd lost 150 pounds without surgery, just working out and eating right. But then when COVID hit, I stopped going to the gym because, people in Texas are crazy. No one was wearing a mask at the gym. When I did start going back to the gym, I would go first thing in the morning and there was no one there, and I felt pretty good about that. But even at that point, it started getting busy, so I stopped going to the gym again. And once one little piece in that routine broke, literally broke, my arm broke because of the cancer. So I've gained back that weight, but I'm working on it. Question number 16. Okay, now this is a long question, and I'm probably going to have a really short answer, but I'm going to read the question anyway. Has the internet done more harm than good by opening creators up to people outside their own tribe and giving those people the perceived right to denigrate both the creator and the tribe? Few of us seriously expect to achieve meaningful communication with people of radically different mindsets. How are we supposed to cope with their active interdiction of our attempts to reach out to the like-minded? My answer to that is I don't really know. I haven't had a lot of people be mean to me on the channel here, but I would suggest that if you're going to reach beyond your tribe and look for people who are like-minded on the internet, you're just going to have to develop a thick skin and learn how to ignore the trolls. They tend to go back under their bridge if you ignore them. And, don't be shy about using the delete key and the block key. You just have to do it repeatedly if you get that kind of trolling. I run a lot of the websites. Occasionally, I'll run into some jerks. But for the most part, I just don't have too big a problem with this. Maybe it's because I'm so mild-mannered. I don't know, because I'm certainly opinionated, but, I don't pop politics on the internet anymore at all. Even to ask, questions to try to understand people on the other side. I don't even do that anymore because they get mad. They don't like being questioned because they're incredibly defensive. At least the people on the other side of the issues for me. So that's not really much of an answer, but it's the best I got for you. Number 17, where is the most interesting place you have traveled to? Manhattan, New York City. I can't imagine any place in the United States more interesting than Manhattan. And my favorite place that I ever went to there was a bar called The Ear, which is one of the oldest continuously operating bars in the entire country. I think it opened in the 18th century sometime, the late 18th century, definitely in the 19th century. You can look it up online. Also remember, for New York City, they had really great prices on their food. But it's been years ago. I went there with a friend of mine named Cree Lawson, who at the time worked for one of the better travel guide publishers online, but I can't remember the name of it anymore. Smart Guides, Rough Guides, I don't know. Anyway, Cree's a terrific guy. He's from Tennessee, and I really enjoyed my visit there. He's the guy who took me to the ear, and I'm really grateful for it still. What is your favorite book format? I like physical books. I like hardcovers. You know, I read a lot of mass market paperbacks when I was growing up. My eyes do not enjoy small print anymore. I have a thyroid condition that makes my eyes dry out and go blurry pretty quickly nowadays when I'm reading. So yeah, definitely big hardcovers. But, you know, I'll read anything in any format. Audiobooks, do they count as reading? Well, do you think they count as reading? I don't think it's the same thing as reading. It's the same thing as being read to. I include audiobooks that I've listened to on my list of books that I've read, but it is technically and specifically not the same thing as reading. It's just not the same thing. But, you know, when I was in the hospital with a broken arm, I couldn't really hold a book and turn pages very efficiently because, you know, I only had the use of one arm. So audiobooks was all I had, and I was grateful to have them. So, and there's nothing wrong with that experience. Don't look down on people who get all their books in via audiobooks. It's just fine. But no, it's not the same thing as reading. By definition, it's not. Reading means that you're looking at words on a page and translating them into something meaningful in your mind. And it's just not the same thing. These next three questions I remember from Steve Donahue. He was the first person to come to me with questions for this. These are also the last three questions on the list. Number 20, what's the worst storm you've ever ridden out? You mean besides my marriage? I've been dying to answer that question since I got it. No, we had an ice storm here in Texas. I believe it was 2 years ago. It was in February. I remember that because it was over my birthday, and there were rolling blackouts. Every hour or so, the electricity would go out for an hour. So we would have an hour with electricity and an hour without electricity. I sleep with a CPAP, a continuous air pressure machine to keep me breathing, keep me from snoring and stuff. And so the storm went on for a few days, and the rolling power outages went on for several days. So I would sleep when the power was on, and I would charge my Kindle while the power was on, because otherwise it was too dark to read. So, and that's the way it went for several days. And then since the power was out for several days, we had a problem with our water too. And so even when the power came back on and we were able to do things again, we had to boil our water. But, you know, it was one of those situations where the underpinnings of society had collapsed a little bit. And it was the first time that I'd ever seen that. But I did have a buddy drive over here in the ice and snow to bring me candles and cupcakes. So thanks for that, Trevor. You made that birthday bearable for me. Number 21, what's the biggest non-human animal you've ever seen in person? An elephant. Elephants are huge. Number 22, what's the highest you've ever been? The question doesn't end there, but sometimes I wish it did. What's the highest you've ever been off the ground without being in an aircraft? So, in Vegas, there is a hotel and casino called the Strat. It used to be called the Stratosphere. And so I Googled how high is the Stratosphere, and it said 31 miles. I thought, man, that tower isn't that big. But I have been to the top of the Stratosphere in Las Vegas and eaten at the revolving restaurant at the top of it. And I did a little more Googling. That's 1,149 feet in the air. And the food there was terrific. So, there you have it. Those are my questions and answers. to celebrate my first 100 subscribers. I think last time I checked, I had 186 subscribers. I don't know that I want to do another Q&A once I hit 200 subscribers, but maybe you guys really enjoyed this. I enjoyed making the video. Let me know in the comments what you thought, and should I do another one when I hit 200 subscribers, or should I wait until I hit 300 subscribers maybe? You tell me. I don't know. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon with another video.